Morning all. I wanted to talk about something I didn't plan to talk about because it came up with the Upload VR. I noticed he was speaking about it, and then I saw some other sources on it, and it's kind of messy. And this is kind of like some scummy stuff that Oculus is doing. So one of the things I was really proud at when I went to Adobe, obviously Sony supports the OpenXR standard, but PlayStation VR was implemented on its own stack because, that's how consoles are. You want to make sure you use the hardware to the fullest, and there's a lot of non-standard developments and stuff. That's the strength of consoles. But the very first thing I did when I joined Adobe was I was like, hey, I'm coming on as a VR person. I really want us to move from OVR, this Oculus's, oh dear, I really want to move from OVR to the more open OpenXR. And for those of you who don't know, Medium's legacy was it was an independent startup back at the very start of the VR days, when we were all playing with, DK1s and, the Hydra was the only motion control, all that. It was written primarily on the Oculus SDK initially because, that was the main SDK that everyone was playing with at the time. And then shortly after that, it got acquired by Oculus, and there was a lot of ex-Double Fine people there, and they built up their own game engine to make Medium work. And when they got acquired by Oculus, Oculus went on to use that sort of that library for a lot of things as well. So anyway, one could say that for a long time, the Medium C++ engine was like the main performant engine inside of things. So its OVR implementation was very good. There's a lot of good reasons to keep it. And I'll admit our OpenXR implementation was rough when it came in because of a lot of things. Some of it to do with how old the tech was, some of it to do with certain changes the graphics programmers didn't want to make. So for example, use the old side-by-side. But it was an important fight, and the moment we switched to it, things got worse, right? And I say this because I want to highlight that it's easier to be proprietary. Open source standards that work across multiple vendors' hardware is hard, right? Well, anyway, it's come out. Partly, it came to my attention through Kent Bye's podcast. I always get confused because obviously I upload VR and everything. Kent Bye's podcast, Voices of VR. It came to my attention through that, but obviously it came to his attention because of an article on GitHub where he talks about the problem with the Unity and the Unreal Engine implementation plugin. Basically, for those of you who don't know, and part of this is legacy. Oculus provides a ready-to-go plugin to use for those systems because, back in the day it was, are you using OVR? Are you using Steam's poorly named OpenVR? What are you using? And Oculus obviously, wanted to provide the easiest developer experience, so they developed the plugin, and the plugin comes from a good place because, they just want developers to have the easiest experience. Both Unity and Unreal have not been the greatest at supporting VR. There's been a lot of problems there. And so Oculus's implementation really was just trying to plug the gap. And I think that's an important thing to note, is it comes from a good place. Of course, Oculus's intentions are very much in Oculus's interest, and their desire is purely to make Oculus developers have the best experience for their hardware. They don't really care about other hardware. So there should come to no one as a surprise that even though it ostensibly uses OpenXR as its backend, they have used a few shortcuts to make it better for their hardware, and they haven't really made a good effort to maintain it as an OpenXR, evenly handed thing. They've implemented a lot of vendor-specific decisions. So now the standard a lot of people do, because again Oculus is very dominant in the market, is a lot of game developers reach for the Oculus plugin solution thinking, oh, it's OpenXR, it'll run on everything, work on that. They probably don't have more than just the Meta headsets. Maybe they've got a contact at Pico that gave them some free hardware. Maybe they're a passionate VR user who has some other hardware. But the reality is they probably haven't got the finances, or, VR hardware is expensive. Oh dear, I'm dead. I'm going to start up a new game. VR hardware is expensive, and it's not surprising if a developer, especially an independent developer, doesn't have all of the hardware to test for compliance. I mean, when I was working at Adobe, even with our resources, we were like, okay, what headsets can't support? And to my day, one of the greatest regrets, because the Vario team wanted to work with us, they sent us some headsets, which for them is a big deal because their headsets are very expensive and they're a small team. And I really wanted to support them. But again, partly because of graphics programming resources and decisions, we just I couldn't get the things I needed to implement support for them, because they're fully OpenXR, but they had some specific requirements basically to make it work, and I just couldn't get there. So yeah, also OpenXR is a standard, but unfortunately it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it a failed standard. The problem is that not enough people are working with the standard, and people can say, oh, a standard is a set of documents, or it's an API or an SDK or whatever, but really what a standard is people working together and trying to solve problems, and it's an active effort. A standard doesn't exist without implementers and without the conversation around, oh, how do we do this, and pushback, and a standard cannot exist academically, shall we say. It just doesn't work. Oh, goddamn fire. So yeah, that's a big problem with OpenXR, and it's one of the reasons I really engaged with Godot while I was at Adobe, because Godot had come on my map while I was at Sony, but back then it hadn't really broken, and more people were speaking about it. But the reason I suppose it pinged on my radar earlier than most was primarily its OpenXR support, because it was one of the only engines that was robustly supporting OpenXR and was trying to make a good effort on that, and had made a good effort. And now, it's practically the reference implementation. I believe it's been announced to be a reference implementation. I can't recall. Godot is excellent. Like, again, on the rendering side, Godot has some issues that, I don't even want to call them issues. I'd say it's still an early engine with development and stuff. So maybe on a rendering side, you will get slightly better, or you will get better OpenXR performance from Unity or Unreal using this plugin, but you won't get as robust OpenXR implementation. And the other nice thing about the OpenXR situation is because Godot is an open source engine, and OpenXR is not a complicated API to get engaged with. It's a very sensibly written API given the limitations. It's flavored. It's very much in the Kronos open GL, Vulkan style. There's legacy there and there's heritage there. So it comes with baggage, as all things do. But the more people engage with OpenXR meaningfully, the better. And I think now both Unity and Unreal are making a better effort, and with Pico and other players coming in. But the problem is, I think Meta's very threatened at the moment because there's stuff on the horizon. Again, part of this is why I left Adobe when I did. Unfortunately, a lot of it's not public yet. But I'm excited for the future of VR, and unfortunately, a lot of the things that make me excited for the future of VR are the same things that are making Meta use its market position to, potentially be anti-competitive. Do I think the OpenXR plugin was made in bad faith? I think the bulk of the engineering work was purely to make people's lives better. Do I think, given the market position, the situation with the plugin, that certain engineers or management would take that as an opportunity to secure market position? Yes, I do, because that's human nature. I think a bulk of the incompatibilities talked about in the articles are purely just the reality of you're implementing a plugin and you care about a specific audience, and sometimes the fastest way or the easiest way to get a thing done is to not do the correct open standards thing. And because you're a private company, there were almost certainly, I guarantee you, there were engineers in the room making well-intentioned arguments for compatibility. They just got overridden. Did they get overridden out of malice? It's very difficult to say. Meta as a company, or Facebook as a company, should I say, because the rebrand is partly to escape that history, doesn't have the best track record. It doesn't behoove trust. That's saying I have a good working relationship with a lot of people at the Meta, but I also know a lot of my experience working with Meta makes me think that yes, they're well-intentioned people who are trying to do the right thing. They might not have been the loudest voices in the room. They might not have been the most senior voices in the room. And that is the situation. I think for Kronos, as an industry body, to come out and make a bold statement, when obviously Meta is such a big part of OpenXR and of, the XR industry, is a bold thing and kind of highlights how bad the situation is. There are workarounds. The workarounds are talked about in the articles. And it's a difficult situation, right? Because I think a lot of people like Kent and a lot of people who are bystanders to VR development, is I think the nicest way I can say that, don't necessarily know the pressures that developers are under. And, if the situation that the developer is in is, hey, I'm using Unity or Unreal, I'm using this plugin, and at the moment the bulk of the market is Meta, and I've got deadlines, I've got a game to develop. This is the lowest friction way to get to the situation, and it might even be that it's not even the lowest friction way. It will develop the best product for release in this financial year or next financial year, say, as an example. And ultimately the developer cares about shipping the best game. And you'll say, well, you could be using Godot. And it's like, well, Godot's not as robust an engine yet. Do I think it's a good play? I mean, yeah, see my develop talk, there's a whole thing there. But it's not as robust an engine yet. And while the OpenXR implementation is great, again, the graphics programming side will be slightly behind. And that has real connotations. And it's not just graphics programming, it's other areas as well. But the graphics programming is most relevant. Do you think I can get in there without dying? Most relevant to the discussion of... No. Most relevant to the discussion of VR implementations. So anyway, I've natted on for a fair bit and I've died a fair bit. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. I hopefully have put links on the screen at the appropriate times. The links will be in the description as well. Look at the Unity and Unreal OpenXR implementations. If you're a developer, read the documentation that was put out about making it compliant, and try and make the best decisions for you. But obviously, I think if you want your game long term to run on all hardware, being an open source, or being on an open standard, should I say, is the most robust way to mean that people can still play your games on all the different hardware in however many years. Yeah, so yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about this morning. Hope people are interested in that.